Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. I was browsing through the Age of Empires forums and found a controversial topic that piqued my interest. Like all internet discussions about unimportant things, it even got a bit heated. The question was whether or not hand cannoneers are in a bad state and need a buff, citing the fact that with equivalent resources, arbalests can hold up better against infantry at close range than hand cannons. For example, here I have 3,000 resources worth of hand cannons and arbalests, each being attacked by 3,000 resources worth of elite samurai. If hand cannons are the more anti-infantry unit, then they should win, right? Or at least do better than arbalests. What happens though when you run the test is the arbalests consistently do better. Of course, both are anti-infantry, at least when used properly and not completely surrounded, but the argument goes that hand cannons are theoretically supposed to specialize in being extra anti-infantry. So is this a sign the unit needs a buff? The comparison between both units has actually been discussed for quite a while, and googling hand cannons versus arbalest, I found a poll from as far back as 2013. It only has 42 votes, but even then, hand cannons weren't getting much love. In this video, we'll investigate whether or not hand cannons do in fact have an edge over arbalests against infantry, and what factors go into your decision of which unit to pick. Let's check it out. To start off by simply looking at their stats, the hand cannon has 7 more attack after all upgrades and 1 extra melee armor. At the same time, arbalests have 1 more range and 5 more HP. So right away it's a muddy comparison, though I think we could say the hand cannon is a bit more of a glass cannon, so to speak. The higher attack though is offset by a higher cost, as well as a slower creation time. Of course, you also have to start thinking about bonus damage, which is why the hand cannoneer is so often seen as an anti-infantry specialist, with 10 extra bonus damage against all infantry except condottieri, and plus 11 against spearmen. The arbalest, in contrast, only has plus 3 against spearmen. Against infantry, that means we're talking about more than double the damage per shot for the hand cannoneer. This is one of those cases though where the stats don't tell the whole story. Despite 7 higher attack, the arbalest easily wins in a direct fight with equal numbers. Now there's a few different reasons for that. The arbalest after thumb ring is firing at about double the rate. It has perfect accuracy compared to 65% accuracy for the hand cannon on paper, though in practice it's more like 75 to 100 depending on the distance. And finally, there's probably a lot of wasted damage by the hand cannon through overkill. These are all things that work against the hand cannoneer and make a purely stats-based comparison incomplete. In fact, another really important point that stats can overlook is how much easier the arbalest is to micro. Both units have the same movement rate, but the faster reload and quicker draw for arbalest, sometimes called frame delay, means it's a lot easier to hit and run. Hand cannoneers, you'll probably know from experience, feel much more sluggish and awkward to control in comparison. Arguably, that's less of an issue in the late game, but to some extent, it's another hidden advantage for arbalests. The hand cannon also doesn't benefit from ballistics, so it has a harder time converting all of its theoretical damage in practice against moving targets. That's not to write the hand cannon off right away, but just to say that any sort of scenario editor test that doesn't include micro is going to be showing it in the best possible light. Another factor that makes the two units hard to compare is their upgrades. Fully upgrading hand cannoneers requires just chemistry and the archer armor technologies. Fully upgrading arbalests, on the other hand, takes the archer line upgrades, armor plus attack upgrades at the blacksmith, as well as thumb ring, ballistics, and technically chemistry as well. I've seen the argument both ways. One argument is that since archers can be created through most of the game, as well as while their upgrades are coming in, that means archers are easier to tech into and to mass. Whereas hand cannons can't be created until chemistry is researched, so they're a harder transition with more of a technology barrier. On the other hand, I've also seen it argued that the archer has a lot more techs to pick up, whereas hand cannons really only need the one technology chemistry, and they're good to go. I'm a bit more sympathetic to the second argument, and there's no question that teching into fully upgraded arbalests is more expensive, as well as taking more research time overall. The hand cannon's short list of required techs works well in something like a fast Imperial strategy, where you want to put all of your resources into advancing quickly and then immediately transition to a powerful ranged unit. Another situation would be if you have a lot of cavalry and need something cheap and quick to counter halberdiers. Like I said, you could argue it both ways, but again, I think the hand cannoneer is the easier transition, which at least gives it a use case where it's arguably better than the arbalest. But so far, that's just all stuff going on in the background. The popular opinion in the thread I saw was that they're not even better at what they supposedly specialize in, and that's really the heart of the matter. Let's put them to the test and see if hand cannons' anti-infantry bonus and high attack can actually make up for their slower, inaccurate firing. To start off simply and get a pure damage per minute comparison, I have some post-Imperial Halberdiers at close range with 1000 HP. The hand cannoneer ended up doing 33% more damage over several minutes, so at least they have that going for them. Of course, their accuracy becomes worse at greater distances, and if we push them back to their maximum range, the results are pretty interesting. They end up doing almost exactly the same damage over time as Arbalest. That's not a good look for the hand cannons, because remember the Arbalest is cheaper, has more HP, one more range, and a lot of those hidden advantages we saw before that make it easier to micro. Of course, missed shots that hit an enemy unit incidentally do half of their damage, so firing into a mass of enemy units, assuming those missed shots still actually hit one, we again see a slight edge in damage output for the hand cannons. Also keep in mind the Arbalest has +3 against spear units that it doesn't have against other infantry. From this test alone, I'm pretty confident saying that with equal numbers, hand cannons are doing more damage to halberdiers than Arbalests, as they should. Now, of course, I hear you, this isn't taking into account their cost. This is where things can get slightly arbitrary. Do you look at total resources or do you only look at gold? Ignoring wood and food means the hand cannoneer is 11% more expensive, whereas weighting everything the same, hand cannoneers are 36% more expensive. Maybe you don't even think wood and food should be weighted the same. Just to pick a bit of a middle ground, I'm going to value gold twice that of wood and food. That means hand cannoneers have a converted cost of 145, and Arbalests have a converted cost of 115 per unit. So now that we have a way to measure the cost of each unit, let's apply it to both and take their damage per minute divided by that cost. Crunching the numbers, we can see that the hand cannoneer and Arbalest give very similar value at close range, but from further away where the hand cannon's accuracy comes into play, the Arbalest is giving you noticeably more bang for your buck. Remember, this is against probably the most common infantry unit that you'll see in the late game. At the end of the day, you really want to pay the least amount to get the most damage possible, and it does look like the Arbalest is winning out here. To go a bit deeper though, there's a factor here that hasn't been included yet, which is wasted damage from overkill. With 1000 HP, all of the damage from each hit is being absorbed and counted, whereas we can't necessarily assume that. To try to factor that in, I ran another test with 10 regular HP halberdiers, and again saw very comparable results. Both units are doing basically identical damage over time, with of course the hand cannoneer costing more, giving the Arbalest an edge in value. As a slight hint of what's to come though, that's not always going to be the case against every unit. Switching things up and trying it against the champion, we see about 25% more damage being done by the hand cannoneer, which puts the two units at almost identical value. Just to be really clear about the value calculation, it's trying to address whether the higher cost of the hand cannoneer is being compensated with a proportional increase in damage. In this case, every 1 food, wood, or half gold you're spending is giving you about 1.5 damage per minute from each unit, so the hand cannon's higher cost is being almost exactly matched by an increase in damage over the Arbalest. Doing the same test again against the Samurai, we get a slight edge for the hand cannoneer, and I think that's probably a pattern that can be generalized to most of the infantry unique units. Their slightly higher HP in this case translates to less overkill, leading to an uptick in the value of the hand cannon. Again, you might wonder why we're not having the Samurai charge the ranged units and why that test is showing the Arbalests are better. Certainly the test can be done that way, but I think it gives the wrong idea about the hand cannon's value. At the end of the day, with a ranged unit against infantry, all I really want from them is that they do the most damage to a group of enemy units as cheaply as possible, and normally you'll have other units in front to try to prevent them from fighting hand to hand. Now, I won't do every infantry unit, but things start to get interesting now as we continue on to Mayan Eagle Warriors and Goth Huskarls. This is where we see the biggest difference, with the hand cannoneer having a massive edge in both damage output as well as value. If you think about what's happening, the Arbalest is doing 1 or 2 damage because of the unit's pierce armor, while the hand cannoneer has the attack to overcome that as well as +10 guaranteed bonus damage. I think from this we can start to draw some conclusions, and to answer the question of how they do against infantry, the answer is against halberdiers and champions they give about the same value as Arbalests, though of course with equal numbers they'll perform quite a bit better. Immediately though, as the enemy's pierce armor starts to increase, you quickly see overwhelming value for the hand cannoneer. Of course, you wouldn't send the hand cannoneer in alone against Eagle Warriors or Huskarls, you would have something like champions in front of it, and this would simply be the supporting unit. Just for curiosity's sake though, and since we're all here, we might as well find out how they do against some units that aren't infantry. A really common counter to archers in the late game is the Hussar, and as you might expect, the extra attack alone doesn't justify the hand cannoneer's cost, so the Arbalest is giving better value. Without the +10 against infantry, they end up doing about the same damage, as remember the Arbalest is reloading about twice as fast. Now that said, as you go up against targets with higher pierce armor and more HP, like the Paladin, we do see the Hand Cannoneer begin to justify its cost. In fact, I think that leads to a pretty general rule. Even if it's not infantry, the Hand Cannoneer performs better in general against units that end with 7 or more pierce armor after upgrades. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that Hand Cannoneers counter Paladins, they definitely don't. But to take an example, if you're up against Halberdiers and Paladins and looking for something to give range support to your own melee units, Hand Cannoneers in theory are worth their higher cost in that case. Of course, in a real game that would only be one of many factors you'd be considering. Another example of a high pierce armor unit that they work better against is the Elite Skirmisher. The hand cannon's high attack makes them much better, though of course not cost effective, even before factoring in gold. Interestingly, they're even population efficient against them as long as these skirmishers aren't making use of their greater range. Don't get me wrong, they're not a counter to skirmishers, but I think it's a fact that's worth keeping in the back of your mind if you find yourself in a situation with a lot of gold. So putting it all together, it's definitely a complicated comparison. You have to think about micro, population versus resource efficiency, as well as what unit compositions you're against, especially their pierce armor. It's not quite as simple as hand cannoneers are always better against infantry. They're more of a ranged unit that specializes in dealing with high pierce armor targets, which reminds me a bit of the throwing axeman in that respect. Obviously, there are a number of civilization-specific bonuses as well that are going to make them perform even better, like the Spanish faster firing, Turks with more HP, Indians with 1 more range, as well as Italians and Portuguese who have discounts to their cost. For quite a few civilizations, the decision is also completely made for you by the tech tree. In fact, I think the question of whether or not they need a buff comes down to what role you think hand cannons are supposed to fill. If the intention is to make them the universally better choice against all things infantry, then I agree with the sentiment the hand cannoneer does need a buff. That said, rather than playing with its HP or fire rate, I think a more direct way to do it would be to just increase its bonus against infantry. There's certainly precedent for anti-unit bonuses much larger than +10. On the other hand, while the Arbalest gives better value against a variety of units, especially ones with low pierce armor, I still think the hand cannoneer has a number of situations where it's a good option. Up close against low armor infantry just isn't one of those times. Special thanks to Samantha, Jean-Paul, Joseph, Connor, Brian, Noah, Gabe, Andrew, Harvey, Dale, and Paul, as well as everyone else on Patreon for continuing to support the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.